Welcome to Small Town Snarks. I'm Joel.
And I'm Miranda. Let's get snarky.
If Brooke took a plea, I'd have her out in 3 or 4, but she claims she did not kill him.
Did she?
Let's watch some more.
We're back.
We're back. Now, you may have thought, Eric Sekula, the original Callahan from STS's production of Legally Blonde,
The musical?
was that you?
Yeah.
I know, it's uncanny, but actually, it was Miranda.
The whole time.
The whole time.
I cannot believe it. I
Yeah.
cannot believe it. It is uncanny the way you two sound alike.
I know. And actually, this is going to blow your mind.
Okay.
I was Callahan in a bald cap the whole time.
What?
I know.
I was there for the show. How did I miss that?
And the person you saw in the booth,
Yeah.
that was Eric.
In a wig?
In a blonde wig.
Oh my god.
I know.
We're losing it here. Snarkies, we're losing it. We're back.
We're back.
With
We're back.
more Legally Blonde fun.
Legally Blonde.
We got some fan mail, fan questions
Yeah, fan mail flying in.
flying in.
Flying in.
Do you hear it? It's flying in. Just landed right here with us. And this one is a really, really great question.
You gotta say who it's from.
Okay. It's from our listener, Devin. The question was, the show that they wanted to know. Sorry, let me start there.
Okay, we're rewind.
I'm
Take it back,
rewinding.
take it
I'm
back.
taking
Try
it
it
back.
again.
They want to know what show felt the hardest to get right, but ended up being the most rewarding.
Such a good question.
That is such a good question.
I feel like there are so many potential answers here.
I would love to say, and I do say this, that all of the shows were rewarding in some form or fashion.
100%. Like, creatively,
Yeah.
I don't know, spiritually, whatever you want to call that.
Yes.
I don't know.
Just in general. I mean,
They
just,
fueled my soul in a way.
I like that. Yeah.
I have a gut answer.
Okay, what's your gut answer?
You can have a different answer than me.
Oh,
but
yeah, I'm sure.
my gut answer is Evil Dead.
Okay. Why is that?
There was just a lot that could go wrong during that show. There was a lot of troubleshooting up until the very end. The show itself is definitely, especially for the character of Ash, it's definitely a marathon. And there were some moments where we just had a lot of blood on stage. And we were trying so hard to prevent slipping. And so, for context, we made our blood out of baby soap and like organic detergent. And the reason we did this is because some of the blood went on Ash's face. So during the end of Act 1, there's a big die number where he's taking a chainsaw to Linda's head and it's squirting up into his face. So we had to be careful because it was near his eyes and everything. We worked with the actor to see what they were comfortable with. That was a mixture we used, but it created a very slippery situation.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we actually ended up putting down old carpets to like try to mitigate that. So there was a lot of trial and error, just a lot of things that could have gone wrong. And the very last performance, after he had used the weapons basically for the last time, they actually broke. So that just showed you like up until the very end, like they made it through that, just what they needed to do, and then they went, we're out, you know? So I would say for me, that was one of the most challenging and rewarding ones, just because, you know, like I said, a lot of variables there. But what about for you? What would you say?
Like you said, I really love this question. I think for me that I would also describe this show as a marathon of sorts. But I would have to say it's August Osage County.
Oh, yeah.
And I only say that because it's one of my favorite plays. It's just so well written and there's so much going on and it does not stop for 3.5 solid hours. I mean, it just goes. 2 intermissions, big show, lots of characters, lots of stories to be told, but there's also so many things that have to happen in that show for it to be right.
Right.
And I feel like to get the energy right, everything has to work in sync with each other. And, you know, I think back on that show very, very frequently of, you know, we had to have an entire dinner.
Yes.
On stage. And we did. We had pie and we had turkey and we had like a 4-course Thanksgiving style dinner every performance of that show and every night of tech for that show.
And you could smell it. It was a small black box, and you could, so was that between Act 1 and 2?
It was the end of Act 2 before Act 3.
Okay, so between 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. And you could just you would start smelling turkey. Mm-hmm. And it was such a unique experience, and I think, like, from my perspective, that as a producer on that, I didn't know how people were going to respond to that type of show. Not only is it a long show, but the themes are tough to swallow. Sure. Mm-hmm. And I remember we'll get into all things August Osage County. I'm sure we have to. I'll do at least 3 episodes, 1 per act, right?
Sure.
3 act show.
Minimum.
But I remember opening night. There's a moment where, I think it's in Act 3, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a moment where one of the characters who's been sleazy the whole show gets what's coming to them.
Oh, yes.
And
Act 3.
I remember people literally stood up and were cheering when that happened. And that's when I knew. I was like, we have them. We got them. Yep. Because with a 3-act show, it's so hard, and you're like, are people, like, is today's audience ready to sit for 3.5 hours and watch this? And and when they stood up and cheered on Act 3, I was like, right in the palm of our hand. It was such a good feeling. Such a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my whole mindset with it, is that, like, if you're not keeping people engaged and they're not following along with every plot point, those moments, for lack of a better word, don't hit as hard.
Yes.
So it was very rewarding from that standpoint to know that we had done everything that we could to make sure that those moments at the end of the show, people were still engaged and were interested in what was happening to these characters. So
I mean, that props to you. That is no easy feat to hold people's attention for that long. So Very, very well done show, Joel.
Yes, same to you on Evil Dead as well. But like I said, every show we've ever done has had some rewarding quality to it. And
for sure.
You know, and I feel like if they didn't, we'd lose out on our interest after a while. So, like, but that's the thing I really love about this question, is that there's always challenges, but at the end of the day, we always get something positive out of every show.
Oh, yeah.
Even when it's kind of hard in the immediate aftermath to kind of find it, there's always a silver lining at the end of the day, so.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain shows that, like, I'm glad we're not close to being caught up on this podcast, because I'm not quite ready to talk about them yet. Yeah, we've got some coming up here in the not so distant future that'll be fun to address. But be on the lookout for a special wine episode, like drinking wine. With Miranda and Joel. We might have a drinking game on the podcast. We'll see.
Goodness. Yeah. But thank you, Devin, for that wonderful question. And if anyone else has questions, please
send them in.
Post them on social media. Send them in to us. We'd be happy to answer them for you.
Yeah.
So. Legally Blonde.
Oh, yeah.
I believe where we left off in this conversation, we had been going through rehearsals and we were getting ready for Tech Week.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot to unpack here.
So I think we have to start this conversation with the 24-hour set construction project.
Project?
I feel like project is... I don't know if there's a better term to use. It was 24 straight hours.
Yeah. That just reminds me of when Jen and I were buying, like, large pieces of lumber for the set, and we're checking out at Lowe's, and the guy goes, "You girls have fun with your little project." Oh. And I was like, does this look like a little project to you?
Oh my gosh.
What do you think we're doing? Building a small birdhouse? Like,
Small birdhouse.
with all of our feminine energy.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, 24 hours. It was probably closer to 48 of just nonstop set construction.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me. Do you want to set the scene a little bit? I know I was unfortunately not there for a portion of it.
So I will say there's some parts I don't remember super well. I do remember Brooks and I built the railings for the platforms. And the railings had magnets on them so we could stick the upper walls to the magnets for the opening sorority house, and then we could pop them off. Now, I remember having this moment, and I think Brooks had something similar, where we looked at each other, realized it was just the two of us putting together pieces of wood.
Yeah.
And we knew we were in trouble because that's not our forte. At the time, Dakota was working nights, so sometimes he would like come work and then he would drive over to work a shift. But it was definitely wasn't our specialty. At one point, we had the entire platform constructed in front of my parents' house. So we like put the whole thing together to make sure it was good. And it was like you could climb up to the roof of my parents' house from the platform. And by climb, I mean take a large step. Like it was about as tall as the house. And as long as the house. It looked like we were building an extension on their home. I do remember at one point, and this was before our 24-hour stretch, I had been up 24 hours working on the set with Brooks. And I opened the restaurant I was working at the next morning. And I remember being with Brooks. My dad had a car that needed to be plugged in and charged. And we had to move his car out to work in the garage. And there wasn't room to move his car back in. So I'd run the cable to charge his car out the front of the house. And would charge it for a few hours before he had to go to work the next day. And I remember looking at my phone and it was like 3 a.m. and I was like, I'm just going to drink a cup of coffee and then I'm going to get going to work. Because I would leave for work around 5:30, 6 in the morning. So I just drank coffee and was like, I'm going. And then I worked a full shift, went home, and then did the whole thing again. The set for Legally Blonde was insane because we had the big platform. We had the walls that popped off the top of the platform. We had all the benches for graduation in the courtroom. We had a bathroom and court facade on a little platform that could turn.
I will say, you mentioned the benches for graduation. We had folding chairs. Do you remember the folding chairs that we had?
Yes, because you picked them up from your church.
I did,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about the folding chairs, but they were plentiful backstage and a menace to have to store. But yes, yeah.
We had the clothing racks, which were set pieces, which I was mistaken on our last episode. We did have the sorority girls ride out on the clothing racks. I think originally I was going to have 2 of them at a time, and we had to cut it down to 1 or something. But something happened. But we did have them ride out on the clothing racks. We had that big honkin' display cabinet.
Oh, yes, we did.
What am I missing? We had all the salon chairs. There was a lot of stuff. And then all the costumes. There were tons and tons of costumes in this show. So the set was the biggest set we had ever done. And we're trying to get it all done. And at the time, it was the same people who were attending rehearsal that are also building the set. So we're doing it outside of rehearsal, trying to get it done. I do remember, so you would come over a lot to help paint.
Absolutely.
And this was actually my first experience with Bright Star. Because during these painting events, we would play different cast recordings, and one that was often on was Bright Star. And I remember you showing me the video of the transformation at the beginning of that show, the costume and age transformation. I was like, wow, this show is pretty cool. So that was kind of how I got introduced to that, which we ended up doing. But it was insane. At one point, you and your friend had to leave because you had work the next day.
Oh, yeah.
And on your way to work, you came back, dropped off donuts for us.
5 o'clock in the morning.
Because we were still out there working. And then you went to work. And I think that was that load-in day. Like,
that
when
was
we were
load-in
at,
day.
So 5 a.m. load-in day, we're still out there working, trying to get everything painted and ready to go.
Yeah, that process, I mean, I remember being over there the night before load-in. And I do remember the Bright Star moment. I will say one of my favorite things about, like, set construction or, like, even when we're, like, pulling props or whatever, it's such a good time to, like, you know, we'll play, like, new albums or we'll like, discover new musicals in the midst of everything else going on. Because I remember also listening... I remember us also listening to the original cast recording of Six at the time, and, like, that was... you know, not what it is now. At that point in time, it was still just in London. But I was like, this great new musical is coming over about the wives of Henry VIII, and it's going to be a big thing. And then, sure enough, it eventually did come over. But it's always, those days are always fun from that standpoint. On the opposite end of things, I just remember there being like a laundry list of things that just needed to get completed. And then knowing that, like, my favorite thing about Tech Week is that you know it's coming. You can always prepare for it as much as possible, but it doesn't stop until it's here. Like, it just, the days keep rolling, and it feels like the more you have to do, the faster the days leading up to it go.
Right.
And I felt like in that process, like, we knew that we wanted a big set. We knew that it was going to require a lot, but I don't necessarily know if we used every ounce of time that we could in order to make sure that it happened. And I mean, you all were working many days, all night long, to make sure that we had a set for that show.
And some actors came over that morning and were, like, touching up paint and stuff. I do remember that. One of the big things that I remember from this, so when I drove the U-Haul over, we had done load-in and everything. And after that had happened, I remember driving back, and Dakota was riding with me, so I dropped him off at Discovery, and then I had to make the drive from Discovery to Frederick, to my parents' house, and I was so tired. I remember actually physically slapping my face to try to keep myself awake while I was making that 15-minute drive, because I was just, like, done. Like, and I think the adrenaline too, like, the adrenaline will keep you going. So the adrenaline of, we have a deadline, we need to get all this stuff done before load-in, and the fact that load-in had just happened, my body was just kind of like, we're shutting down now, and I was like, but you can't yet, I need to get home, and just, like, hitting myself in the face trying to get myself home. And oh my gosh, it was never again with that last minute stuff. And that's why people are always like, there's always stuff that happens last minute, unfortunately, and it's my least favorite thing. Okay, I don't enjoy the last minute things. I like everything to be, like, put together, and there's a plan, and we're just assembling. We're not cutting, we're not doing any of that, we're just assembling stuff ready to go. And you know, I've had people to kind of tell me, like, hey, you know, like, we need time to do this stuff, and we need, you know, it's going to get done throughout Tech Week. And I'm like, but see, that's not my speed.
And you don't want to rest on that.
No, and the drama teacher who was there before our drama teacher at the high school had a rule, and at the time everyone thought it was very strict, but this is my favorite rule ever, which is, if it is not on stage the first day of Tech, it is not going on stage during the show. And, you know, I remember he had someone who was still working on costumes in the final hour, and she had him ready for the second day of Tech, but not the first. And he was like, guess what? They're not going on stage. And it seems like he was being kind of a jerk. But the reasoning behind those rules is, well, first of all, for safety. So everyone has proper time to practice with everything they're using.
Absolutely.
But also for your freaking sanity. Like, I just can't. I mean, we just, you know, recently, have had productions where we're kind of like doing things throughout the tech week, and every time that happens, I always have conversations with you or Savannah or Dakota, and the conversations always go the same of what can we do so this never happens again, because it stresses me out to a level that I just don't enjoy.
Exactly.
So it's always a game of trying to figure out how to fix those things. We've never gotten to Legally Blonde level again, I will say.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. We've never gotten there, and I do believe that's partially because of the rules we've put in place. But every time I see us inching away from everything's ready first day of tech, I try to rein us back in because it is such a slippery slope.
Yep.
Like, I know how sexy it is to procrastinate sometimes. I get it. But you're borrowing your future happiness when you do that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up, in that, like, because we had that experience and we know what it's like to be in that position, we are so adamant about trying to avoid that. And like, I think you're very accurate when you say that we've gotten close. I mean, we've had days where we've been working on the set prior to the show starting, or like prior to moving in for tech. And, you know, it's very much so a all hands on deck kind of conversation. But again, it has never reached the point where we're like in the, saying the 11th hour isn't close enough to how close we were with Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
Like, being that close to the end and still needing a set.
Now, to be fair, we worked our butts off so that their set was done for the entirety of tech.
Yes.
So, like, once we loaded it in, it was done. But the marathon of getting to that load-in day.
Well, I think we've set that up nicely to talk a little bit about load-in.
Yeah.
In that process. You described the size of the set for this show.
Yes.
My favorite thing about moving into any theater is determining the paths backstage, and also the mechanics of how a set is going to work.
Yep.
And no matter how familiar we are with what we have built and how familiar we are with the stage, nothing ever goes 100% according to plan.
No, yeah,
and
that's very true.
I have a very clear memory from the earliest day, the first day of Tech Week, running that opening number and trying to figure out how we were going to get the second story wall facades down from the second story and out of the theater, because we never need them again the rest of the show.
Yes.
So you described briefly when you were talking about the set. It was a 2-level set. And those of you who are familiar with Legally Blonde, the opening number takes place at the sorority house.
Exterior
of the sorority house, yes. And we essentially had a 2-level set where there were windows and the sorority sisters could pop their heads out of the windows. Now, the really annoying thing about this show is within about 45 seconds, maybe a minute into the show, we move inside the sorority house.
Sure do.
And we never go back outside the sorority house like we do in that opening number ever again for the rest of the show. So...
And they give you one line
of
dialogue to do it.
Yep.
Just one.
Yes. So that process of it was truly an all hands on deck. Everyone had a responsibility and everyone had to make sure that the walls came down safely, and each thing had to happen in sequence in order for it to happen safely. And I mean, that was all the way down to one person was in charge of paging the curtains, so that way the walls could go out. Someone was at the back door because we were taking stuff outside of the theater to store it.
Yep.
Someone was standing by the back door ready to receive everything and start stacking it appropriately so it fit. I mean, it was a behemoth of a show.
And this is why this is the perfect example of when Joel and I say, this is not our first rodeo. This is the type of thing we mean. This was a very difficult transition to accomplish, and I'm super proud of it, and I have a clip of it, and I will try to pull that and post it, because this whole transition happens in probably about 40 seconds.
Oh yeah.
And not only that, I also remember we had a moving staircase.
Oh yeah. Yes, we did.
For the sorority house. So this staircase would slide out, it lined up perfectly with the top of the platform. And we had part of the railing that, again, was on a magnet. So you could pull it up to be able to walk up onto the platform and then pull it back down. So the girls were we slid the staircase up flush against the front of the platform. They could walk up the staircase, flip that little railing, walk onto the platform, and then just flip it back down. I mean, we got really creative. There was some really cool stuff that we did in this show that it really out of the box.
Yeah.
And that's, part of why I think community theater forces you to think of creative things, especially when you're in a touring format like we are. And because, again, we were so young when we started this, we didn't have, formal training of this is how you build a platform and this is how you build a staircase. And if there's a hurricane, it is not going to come down. We were just okay, how do we do this in such a way that it's safe, but also it does all the 20 million things that it needs to do throughout the show.
Exactly.
And it only has to last us one weekend, and we don't have a ton of money and a ton of materials.
Right.
And this is a perfect example of we were really thinking outside the box and able to accomplish some crazy stuff with not a crazy budget.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And, we talked a little bit in the last episode about those transitions and how intentional they were, and being in the space and actually getting to play with them even more and figure out how we can incorporate in lights during tech to make those transitions look even better, and lighting downstage so we could do the scene changes upstage. It just was so... I feel like we were really in our element that tech week, where we were okay, great, we know what needs to happen. We have all of the pieces there to make it happen. Just doing that execution was, really rewarding. That process was really rewarding. I love, we talked about the tornado during Take It Like a Man.
Yes.
I still think back to our transitions that we included, and the genius use of platforms in this show. We had 2 rolling platforms that were used that would fit on both sides of the stage. And we could preset things on them, and we would just roll them out whenever we needed them. And they were used in the classroom, the Harvard classroom scenes. And I remember just trying to show, we had to show Elle Woods leaving being kicked out of class, and turning the whole classroom around so quickly by just rotating the platforms around. It was so intentional and also so purposeful. And I think about that tech week a lot when I think about, shows that we're doing. We've had really great tech weeks. We've had really bad tech weeks. We've had tech weeks that I wish could have gone differently. They run the gambit. But I feel for this particular show, it was really us trying to make things work in such a precise way.
We were very intentional about everything we're doing. And I believe this was really, we got to flex our creative muscles when it came to transitions with this one. And you can see the seed of what became Rent, or what became some of these other shows that have some of my favorite transitions that we've ever done. You can see the start of that thought process in Legally Blonde, for sure. We do have to talk about the pit and throwing them in last minute and how that worked.
Did we have a sits probe for this show? I can't remember.
We did.
Okay, so we had a sits probe.
And the sits probe was at our rehearsal space. So we had a sits probe at our rehearsal space before we were supposed to load in. And the pit, everyone, nice people, great people, I'm sure, still doing well today. I don't know where the disconnect was for this particular production, but I remember some of them, it was the sits probe was literally their first time looking at the music
That's
ever.
What it sounded like, yeah.
And that was such a scary feeling. And I remember looking at the cast, and the cast, you could tell, were terrified. Because at that point, we put in 3 months of work into this. And it was learning opportunity for me. If that were to happen today, I would immediately switch to tracks and thank them for their time and just be like, hey, they're very specific about the cues they need, and we just can't do this right now. You have to be super familiar with the music in order to go right into the show smoothly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never had a sits pro. I mean, it was like back to high school, and I think that was part of the disconnect too. Is the person who I tasked with like creating the pit and stuff. Their experience was from our high school, and our high school kind of taught you like it all happens at the last minute, and that's at this point in time, that's not how we were operating anymore. So when I like saw these people basically looking at the music for the first time 2 days before Tech Week, I was like, oh boy, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And they got there eventually, but it was definitely a scary moment. I remember the person we call Paulette, I remember her coming up to me and saying like, this one day during Tech, like, hey Miranda, morale's really bad backstage. I think you need to go kind of like rally the troops. And I did, and I remember talking to them, and I remember being like, you know your stuff. You are prepared. Don't worry about if someone else isn't prepared. That's not in your control.
Right.
You know the show. They'll get there. I know it's not fair what's happening right now, but you need to go out and do what you know how to do. And it was definitely a moment of like, you know, me feeling like I let them down a little bit, even though it wasn't my fault what was happening. But I think it definitely set this standard of, I mean, first of all, we used tracks for a while after that just because I didn't want that other variable coming in.
Right.
But I remember when we went to American Idiot, which was the first time I'd used a pit since Legally Blonde, which is quite a while later. I remember still having that like pit in my stomach before we went into the sits probe of like, all right, this could go either way. And just seeing them come in and know the music and being really passionate about the material. And I think that's the secret is if you're bringing in musicians, you want them to care about the show and the material. And I think these people were just like, oh yeah, you know, I'll do it for so and so who's running it, but they didn't really know Legally Blonde. They didn't really care about Legally Blonde,
right.
And it was a kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that, and I remember that process, and like you said, it definitely did get to where it needed to be in order for us to do the show, which was great. But you know, I think having live musicians, like you said, that are passionate about the material and really are excited for that process really does make a big difference. And, you know, ultimately, we know a lot of our actors prefer working with live musicians as well. And, there's a lot of benefits of having live musicians.
100%.
You know, they can help you keep pace. They can help you if you fall off course, which, backing tracks can't do.
And if they're invested, they elevate a show.
Absolutely.
Very much.
Absolutely. So, from that process, I do remember that being a conversation and a continued situation that, I think it's very telling, like you said, that we went for a long time without using a live pit.
Well, and I've also personally gotten a lot better at advocating for my actors, my performers. And, just recently I helped at our former high school with their production of Legally Blonde. And they did a live pit. And again, the live pit came in later. And we were rehearsing with the cast recording. And I remember during What You Want, there's a big dance break and there's a drum beat that happens before they start the dance break. And the pit kept playing the song and there was no drum beat. And I remember stopping the whole thing and I was like, what is going on? There's something in this music that's not being played.
Yeah.
And they all looked at the music and they were like, oh, Johnny, you have notes here. And then Johnny was like, oh yeah, I do. And then he played it and I was like, beautiful. That's it. And then I was like, guys, that's their cue. I was like, we are going to play this 5 times in a row so they know their cue and so you know their cue.
Yes.
And I looked at Johnny. I was like, hey, Johnny, I know you're 15 years old. Your drum beat cues this entire dance. I was like, if you forget everything else, no problem, but don't forget this one thing. Yeah. And he was like, I got it. And it made a world of difference. And no one was offended either.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest lessons for me is like learning, like, just because you're advocating for other people doesn't mean people are going to get mad at you. And,
exactly.
And at this point in time, I would have been a lot more firm with like, we need to run this song 5 times because you're not playing it the way they know it, and their cues are off. And like you said, they got there. By the time we opened, it sounded great, and it was exactly what it needed to be. But it was the tech week. It definitely added extra stress during tech week because we were basically relearning the music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of incidents of tech week, one of my favorite and also one of the most stressful moments of this tech week had nothing to do with our production at all. So this was our first time performing at the community college.
Yes.
Beautiful venue. I really do love that space. It's a great space, and like the team there is excellent. But something we did not have to deal with at other venues was the process for handling severe weather.
Yep.
So at the time we were doing all of our shows, the last weekend in July was typically like our weekend that we would do our performances. Usually. And, summertime, known for thunderstorms, known for bad weather. And I remember, I want to say it was like the Wednesday night of tech week. I remember everyone's phones going off with an alert of there being severe weather. It was probably like a tornado warning or some sort of severe weather.
Yep.
And then shortly thereafter, I remember someone at the space coming around to find you and I and let us know that, because of the severe weather, we need to stop running the show and we all need to move to underneath the balcony.
Yeah, as like a school tornado drill.
Yes, yeah, because that was the safe place during the storm. And my immediate thought was, okay, we need to get everybody in that position, and we did, and we stopped the show, and we were probably like halfway through Act 1 or something like that. Like we had, been running the show, and I remember that happening. And then I remember after everybody was safe and we were all in a good spot, I remember looking at you and saying, so what exactly do we do if this happens during a performance?
And the answer was, we hope it doesn't happen.
Exactly. Exactly. And, I mean, of course, we want everybody to be safe, and that was top priority. But it was like, okay, I mean, if this happens during our performance, like, does everybody, like, I mean, fortunately, we weren't in the position where we, A, had to deal with that, and B, we weren't in charge of the space, so we didn't have to make that decision. Like, it was out of our hands, but
right.
I remember just rallying the cast back in that area as we waited for the storm to pass by and just thinking to ourselves, like, okay, great. This is another obstacle that, again, out of our control, but something to consider.
I remember thinking, too, because we had started the run with basically just enough time to run the show and intermission.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to people running the space, and I'm like, so can we, like, tack this time on to another day? Because, like, we're just losing 20 minutes or so of our rental.
Yeah.
And, I mean, luckily that space, they've always been really great with, like, helping out when we're in a bind. So they were good about, we just need a little bit of extra time to get this show up and running because we had to stop when we weren't anticipating having to stop. So they were great about that, but it was definitely like a moment of, I know that the chances of the building collapsing during a thunderstorm and someone getting hurt pretty low. So at that point, I was way more focused on, all right, when can we go back and start running the show again? Because I was fairly confident that we were going to be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, this, again, wasn't the first time that we had dealt with, like, bad weather impacting, our shows. I mean, we had that situation with Spring Awakening, and, of course, it will not be the last time that we have to have a conversation with a future show where we had to address an audience prior to the show about potential bad weather. So just another learning opportunity that we weren't ready to, or weren't expecting to have to pick up, but we got it and we just kept rolling with it. So
we love and hate those learning opportunities, don't we?
We sure do. The other thing that I really wanted to address that I remember from this tech week was the fact that this show had so many unique prop items, and they weren't just unique props, but they were props that, like, we had to go out of our way to create or either, find or source.
Yes.
My favorite one being, and you'll have to share how we came upon this item or how we went out to purchase it, But there's a moment in What You Want where Elle Woods is explaining that the reason why she wants to go to Harvard is that her interest in going to Harvard is tied to her being in love, and she's going after what she loves, the person that she loves. And right in that moment, a banner of Elle Woods and Warner is brought out by the ensemble.
A very large banner.
A very large banner.
How about
love? You ever been in love? Yeah. So first off, does the banner still exist?
Yes, I saw it the other day.
Oh, okay. So you know where the banner is. Okay.
It either needs to be hung up in the garage warehouse, or it needs to be hung up here because it's phenomenal, and I will not throw it out.
You shouldn't. I'm sure that took up 3/4 of our prop budget for that show as well.
It was, I mean, it was probably like $200 or something.
For such a short moment in the show.
Worth it though. I will say I've spent money on things that I'm like, yeah, that wasn't worth it. This one was worth it. It was such a moment. We had it custom ordered and it was shipped to us, and then we stapled it to basically like wooden poles.
Oh yeah.
And they had it on stage, and the cheerleaders, they were all dressed as cheerleaders at that point. Would unroll it, and they would have it waiting, and then Elle would be like, how about love? And there's a little ding, and on the ding, they put up this banner, and it was probably like, how big do you think it was? I mean, it's probably 6 feet long.
I don't know if it was that long. I mean, it was big. It wasn't any bigger than 6 foot long, but it was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge, and it got the laugh that it needed to. It was great from that standpoint.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And I will say, it's hard to spend that much money on a prop that you know you're never going to use again. Because when am I ever going to use that again?
Right, exactly.
It has their faces on it.
Exactly.
But that one was, so much fun.
So good. Yeah, I mean, the props were crazy good.
I also had to file special paperwork to be able to have dogs in the show at Carroll Community College.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I had to fill out special applications for the dogs, and now they had just done a show that had a dog, so they assured me, like, they were like, I think it's going to be fine, whatever, you just need to fill out this paperwork. Filled out all the paperwork, including, like, rabies information, like, all sorts of stuff. Filled out all the paperwork. We were well into the process before they actually sent me the, hey, it's been approved. So I was sweating a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was like, what do I do if they don't approve these dogs? But they did. But it was definitely a unique step that I'd never done for a show before, filling out little dog applications.
Yeah, I mean, in between, like, the technicalities with that and making sure that everything was, taken care of appropriately, other thing I just would be amiss to not talk about with this Tech Week process was just the amount of costumes and costume changes that had to happen, and like orchestrating all of that was insane.
It probably comes close to SpongeBob in terms of number of costumes. There were also, not everyone, probably half the cast had a graduation robe as well. So there were the Delta Nu regular outfits, the Delta Nu Greek chorus outfits. They all had cheerleader outfits. There were the whipped into shape exercise video outfits, and then the jailhouse outfits.
Yeah.
Elle had like 10 outfits. There was another group number. Yeah, so we all did the graduation outfits. Just a lot of random group numbers.
For sure. Yeah.
So keeping all those straight, I don't even know how we did it, to be honest. Now we have garment bags, and we put everyone's costume in a bag and label it with their name when we move stuff.
Yeah.
Back then we did not do that. I don't know how we kept track of it. That Jen must have been a saint for that show. I don't know how she kept track of all of it, but somehow it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it looked great, as all of her costuming does, but it looked great, and everyone just, like we said at the beginning, they were so passionate about the show, and they wanted to do it right, and they wanted to give it everything they could. And it showed. At the end of the day, it really did show.
And there were quick changes, too, which I can't wait to talk about when we talk about the performance itself.
Yes, oh my gosh. I have so much to say about the performance itself.
Some of my favorite costume changes, some of my favorite set transitions.
Yeah.
This is a good one. I'm very proud of how it turned out.
Well, we're getting to the end of our time here today. We definitely will be back to discuss all things Legally Blonde performances. Our two weekends of performances for Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
There's so much to address. So many great moments. So,
Dear El, he's a lucky guy.
And you're gonna cry.
I got tears coming out of my nose.
Mad props.
He's the campus catch.
You're the perfect match.
Because you both have such great taste in clothes. Of course he will propose.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We will be back with more, with the finale of our Legally Blonde saga.
I mean, we've got interviews coming.
We do. We've got interviews coming, but yeah.
Yeah.
We'll put a bow on Legally Blonde.
We will, and we'll put it in a
episode.
box. We'll put it on the shelf.
So.
Call it a day.
So
all right, my friend.
Stay tuned. Alrighty, till
it's
next
been
time.
fun as always.
Absolutely.
See ya.
See ya.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for getting snarky with us. We'll see you later.
See you next time.